The thing about apologizing to the man who's been groping your wife is that it requires a special kind of performance art. Standing on Bryce Landon's pristine doorstep in his fancy Beacon Hill neighborhood, I practiced my lines one more time. Sorry for overreacting when you had your hands all over Elise at our barbecue. Yeah, that sounded about as sincere as a politician's campaign promise. My name's Nick O'Hara, and I'm apparently the kind of husband who apologizes for defending his wife's honor. At least that's what Elise told me this morning over her organic fair trade coffee while she scrolled through her phone like she was reading the weather forecast instead of orchestrating my public humiliation. Nick, you embarrassed me in front of everyone, she'd said, not even looking up from her screen. Bryce has been my best friend since college. You know that. He was just being affectionate. Affectionate. Right. Because grabbing someone's backside and whispering in their ear while slow dancing to classic rock at a family barbecue is just good old-fashioned friendship. I'm a contractor, not a diplomat. But even I know the difference between a friendly pat and a full-contact sport. The Landon house loomed before me like a monument to everything I wasn't. 3 stories of brick and ivy, with a circular driveway that probably cost more than my annual income. Bryce had done well for himself in real estate, riding the Boston market boom while I fixed other people's broken pipes and rotting decks. I rang the doorbell, which played some classical tune that sounded expensive. Through the frosted glass, I could see movement, and then Janelle Landon opened the door. She was a sharp woman with intelligent eyes and the kind of no-nonsense attitude that came from years of dealing with Bryce's oversized ego. Nick, she said, surprise flickering across her face, what brings you by? Is Bryce home? I wanted to talk to him about what happened at the barbecue. Oh, her expression cooled slightly. Yes, he's here. Come in. The foyer was all marble and mahogany, with a chandelier that could probably power a small city. Family photos lined the walls. Bryce in his high school football uniform, vacation shots from places I couldn't afford to visit. The usual suburban success story. Bryce, Janelle called up the stairs. Nick's here to see you. Heavy footsteps thundered down the staircase, and then there he was. Bryce Landon, in all his 6'2", former athlete glory. Even at 40, he maintained the swagger of someone who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. His smile was all teeth and zero warmth. Nick, hey buddy, what's up? Buddy, sure, because that's what you call the husband of the woman you've been putting moves on. I wanted to apologize, I said, loud enough for Janelle to hear from the kitchen where she was pretending to organize something, for making a scene at the barbecue. Bryce's smile widened. Hey, no worries, man. These things happen. Yeah, well, I should have handled it better. When I saw you kissing my wife and telling her how beautiful she looked while your hands were all over her, I should have been more understanding. After all, you two have such a long history together. The color drained from Bryce's face like someone had pulled a plug. Behind us, I heard something crash in the kitchen, probably whatever Janelle had been holding. Nick, Bryce started, his voice tight, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Oh, I understand perfectly, I continued, my voice carrying through the house like a town crier announcing the news. I understand that you forgot about the security cameras I installed in my backyard last month. You know, the ones that record everything in high definition? Great audio quality, too. Janelle appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face pale but her eyes blazing. What security cameras, Nick? The ones that caught your husband telling my wife how he's never forgotten their college days, and how he'd love to relive some of those memories. Real romantic stuff, Janelle. You'd probably love to see it. You son of a... Bryce stepped forward, but Janelle's voice cut through his bluster like a knife. Bryce, kitchen, now. The silence that followed was the kind you hear right before a tornado touches down. Bryce looked like he wanted to strangle me, but his wife's tone had that special quality that married men learn to fear. I should probably go, I said, backing toward the door. But Bryce, I accept your apology for trying to steal my wife. Water under the bridge, right? I was halfway down their driveway when I heard the shouting start. Janelle's voice carried clearly through their expensive windows, and she was asking some very pointed questions about college friends and inappropriate touching and whether Bryce had lost his mind completely. My phone buzzed with a text from Elise. How did it go? I typed back, Great, I think they're having a really honest conversation about friendship boundaries. By the time I reached my truck, Bryce had burst out of the house. He jogged down the driveway, his face red with fury and what might have been panic. You think you're real clever, don't you? He snarled, grabbing my arm as I opened the driver's door. Clever enough to install security cameras before hosting a barbecue, I replied. Funny how technology works these days. You're done for, O'Hara. You hear me? Done. I looked at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. Get in line, Bryce. And next time you want to reconnect with old college friends, maybe don't do it at their husband's house. Bad optics. He released my arm like I'd burned him, and I climbed into my truck. As I drove away, I could see him in my rearview mirror, standing in his circular driveway like a statue of defeated entitlement. My phone rang before I'd gone 2 blocks. Elise's name flashed on the screen. What the heck did you do? She screamed before I could even say hello. I apologize, just like you asked. Janelle just called me crying. She's throwing Bryce out. Sounds like a personal problem. Nick, this is serious. You've ruined everything. Funny, I said, pulling into our apartment complex parking lot. From where I'm sitting, I'd say I fixed a few things. The line went silent. I sat in my truck for a moment, watching the windows of our second-floor apartment. 16 years of marriage, 2 kids, and a mortgage we could barely afford. All of it hanging by a thread because my wife couldn't keep her hands off her college boyfriend, and I couldn't keep my mouth shut about it. But as I climbed the stairs to our front door, I found myself whistling. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd actually accomplished something. 3 days after my performance at the Landon House, I was lying face down on wet asphalt behind Murphy's Hardware, tasting metal and wondering if my ribs were supposed to make that grinding sound when I breathed. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my whole career fixing things that were broken, and now I was the thing that needed fixing. You should have minded your own business, Bryce said, standing over me like some kind of suburban warlord. His buddy, a thick-necked guy I didn't recognize, was flexing his knuckles and breathing hard from the workout they'd just given my face. I tried to push myself up, but my left arm wasn't cooperating. Funny thing about marriage, I wheezed. My wife is my business. That earned me a kick to the ribs that sent fireworks exploding behind my eyelids. I curled up like a pill bug, trying to protect what was left of my dignity and my internal organs. Your wife doesn't want to be your business anymore, Bryce said. She made that pretty clear when she moved in with me yesterday. That hit harder than his friend's fists. Elise had moved out while I was at work, taking Maddie with her. Only Liam had refused to go, and at 16 he was old enough to make that choice stick. But hearing it from Bryce, delivered with a boot to my ribs, made it feel like a final blow. The thing is, Nick, Bryce continued, crouching down so his face was close to mine, you cost me my marriage. Janelle took the house, the cars, everything. So now I'm going to cost you yours. Looks like you already did, I managed to say. He grabbed a handful of my hair and lifted my head off the pavement. This is just the beginning, you piece of... Hey, what the heck is going on here? The voice came from behind a delivery truck that had just pulled into the alley. A young guy in a rideshare jacket was climbing out, his phone already in his hand. Mind your own business, Thickneck growled. I'm calling the cops, the driver said, his thumb moving across his phone screen. This is attack. Bryce released my hair and my face met the asphalt again. Let's go, he muttered to his friend. I heard footsteps moving away, then a car door slamming and an engine starting. The rideshare driver was beside me now, his hand on my shoulder. Jesus, man, are you okay? Don't move. The ambulance is coming. I wanted to tell him I was fine, that I just needed to walk it off, but when I tried to speak, I tasted copper and felt something loose rattling around in my mouth. Probably a tooth. I'd always been vain about my teeth. The next few hours were a blur of sirens and fluorescent lights, and people asking me questions I couldn't answer without slurring. Concussion, they said. 3 cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and a face that looked like I'd gone 10 rounds with a meat grinder. The police took my statement, while a nurse stitched up the cut over my left eye. I told them about Bryce, about the threats, about everything except the part where I deliberately humiliated him in front of his wife. Some details don't help your case. We'll look into it, the officer said, but his tone suggested that 2 middle-aged men beating the heck out of each other in an alley wasn't exactly priority one for Boston PD. They kept me overnight for observation, which was medical speak for making sure your brain doesn't leak out of your ears. I spent most of the night staring at the ceiling tiles and trying to figure out how my life had gone from suburban routine to hospital bed in the span of a week. Liam showed up the next morning with a duffel bag and the kind of grim expression that made him look older than his 16 years. He'd inherited my dark hair and his mother's sharp cheekbones, but the stubborn set of his jaw was pure O'Hara. "How bad is it?" he asked, pulling up the visitor's chair. "I'll live, probably." I tried to sit up straighter and immediately regretted it. "How's your sister?" "Confused. Mom's telling her you had an accident at work." "And you?" "I'm not 13, Dad. I know BA when I hear it." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Was it Bryce?" I nodded, and something dangerous flickered in my son's eyes. "Don't even think about it," I said quickly. "This is between him and me." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like he's winning." That stung, mostly because it was true. Bryce had my wife, my daughter, and now he'd put me in the hospital. The scoreboard wasn't exactly in my favor. "I've got something to tell you," Liam said, his voice careful. "I can't go back to the apartment." "What do you mean?" "Mom changed the locks yesterday. Had some guys come by while I was at school. My stuff is in garbage bags on the fire escape." I closed my eyes and tried to process this new level of betrayal. Elise hadn't just left me. She'd evicted our son from his own home. "Where are you staying?" "Got a sublet downtown. It's not much, but it's month to month." He hesitated. "There's a couch if you want it." The idea of crashing on my teenage son's couch should have been humiliating. Instead, it felt like the first good news I'd had in days. "Yeah," I said, "I'd like that." The discharge process took another 4 hours, which gave me plenty of time to think about the spectacular way my life had imploded. 17 years ago, I'd been a young contractor with a new wife and big dreams. Now, I was a middle-aged man with a concussion and no fixed address, getting ready to sleep on his kid's couch. But as Liam helped me into his beat-up Honda Civic, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't broken. Beaten up, sure. Homeless, definitely. But not broken. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said as we pulled out of the hospital parking lot. "What's that?" "I'm actually looking forward to seeing what happens next." Liam glanced at me like I'd lost more than just a tooth in that alley. "Dad, are you sure you don't have brain damage?" "Probably, but for the first time in months, I feel like I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not." "And who are you?" I looked at my reflection in the passenger side mirror, swollen face, stitches and all, and smiled with what was left of my teeth. "I'm the guy who's going to teach Bryce Landon why you don't mess with a man's family." "How?" "I'm still working on that part." Liam's sublet was a studio apartment above a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, and it smelled like grease and dreams deferred. The couch was a futon that had seen better decades, but it was mine for as long as I needed it, which made it better than the Ritz-Carlton, as far as I was concerned. 2 weeks after my encounter with Bryce's fists, I was mobile enough to start planning my comeback. The stitches were out, the ribs were healing, and my face had gone from hamburger to merely ugly. More importantly, I was angry in the kind of focused way that makes men do dangerous things. "You look like you're plotting someone's downfall," Ray Kowalski said, settling into the apartment's only chair with a cup of coffee from the restaurant downstairs. Ray had been my best friend since high school, back when we were both too stupid to know we weren't invincible. 25 years as a Boston cop had taught him otherwise, but retirement had left him restless and willing to help with projects that weren't strictly legal. "Not downfall," I said, adjusting the ice pack on my shoulder. "Just a complete and total destruction of everything Bryce Landon holds dear." "That's my boy, always thinking big." Ray pulled out a manila folder and dropped it on the coffee table. "I did some digging on your new best friend." The folder contained photocopies of public records, credit reports, and what looked like surveillance photos. Ray might be retired, but he still had contacts throughout the city, and information was the one currency that never lost its value. Bryce Landon, age 41, real estate agent with Morrison & Associates. Divorced as of last week. Janelle took him for everything he was worth, including the house, both cars, and half his business assets. Ray flipped through the pages like he was reading a menu. Currently living in a studio apartment in Back Bay that costs more per month than most people make. What about income? That's the interesting part. His business has been struggling since the market cooled down. He's behind on his rent, his car payments, and his child support. Your wife moving in with him isn't helping his financial situation. I studied the surveillance photos. Bryce looked older, more desperate than the confident man who'd threatened me in that alley. Desperation made people sloppy, and sloppy people made mistakes. "There's more," Ray continued. He's been seen around town with a woman named Angela Torres. Married woman, husband's a firefighter. Apparently your boy Bryce has a type. Married women. Married women with something to lose. I leaned back against the futon and tried to ignore the protest from my ribs. What about Elise? Ray's expression softened slightly. You sure you want to know? Hit me. She quit her job at the insurance company. Or got fired. Depends on who you ask. Word is her supervisor's wife found out about the affair and made some calls. She's been looking for work, but the job market's tight, especially when your references won't return calls. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. Elise might be a cheating wife, but she was still my kid's mother, and Maddie needed stability more than I needed revenge. What's your play here, Nick? Ray asked. Because if you're thinking about doing something stupid, I need to know now so I can talk you out of it. Nothing stupid, I said. Just something effective. The first phase of my plan was simple. Intelligence gathering. For the next week, Ray and I took turns following Bryce around the city, documenting his movements and his meetings. We learned that he favored expensive restaurants he couldn't afford, drove a leased BMW that was probably getting repossessed soon, and met with Angela Torres twice a week at a hotel in Cambridge. The second phase was more complicated. I needed to get back into my own apartment to retrieve some important documents, financial records, insurance papers, and the hard drive from my security system that contained several months' worth of footage and from the backyard cameras. This is breaking and entering, Ray pointed out as we sat in his car across from my apartment building at 2 a.m. It's my apartment. My name's still on the lease. Your wife changed the locks. My wife doesn't own the building. Ray sighed the way he used to when his patrol partner suggested doing something that would probably end with paperwork and suspension. You've got 10 minutes. After that, I'm leaving with or without you. The fire escape was exactly where I'd left it, and the window to Liam's old room was still broken from when he'd tried to sneak out last summer. Some repairs were worth putting off. The apartment felt like a museum of my former life. Family photos still hung on the walls, and Elise's coffee mug was in the sink like she'd just stepped out for a moment. But her presence was everywhere. In the rearranged furniture, the new curtains, the smell of Bryce's cologne lingering in what used to be our bedroom. I found the documents I needed in the home office, stuffed them into a garbage bag along with some clothes and personal items. The security system hard drive was hidden behind a false panel I'd installed when we first moved in. Elise had never known about it, which meant Bryce didn't either. I was almost finished when I heard voices in the hallway outside the front door. Elise's laugh, followed by Bryce's deeper voice saying something that made her giggle like a teenager. Crap, I whispered, grabbing my bag and heading for Liam's window. Did you hear something? Elise's voice, closer now. Probably the neighbors, Bryce replied. This place has thin walls. I was halfway out the window when I heard the front door open. My ribs screamed in protest as I pulled myself onto the fire escape, but I managed to get the window closed just as the lights came on in the living room. Ray was waiting in the alley below, his engine running and his face grim. How'd it go? Got what I needed, I said, climbing into the passenger seat, plus a little extra motivation. What kind of extra motivation? I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken while I was inside. Bryce's clothes in my closet, his toiletries in my bathroom, his coffee mug in my kitchen, the kind that's going to make this personal. Back at the apartment, I spread the contents of my bag across the coffee table like a general planning a campaign. Financial records, security footage, photographs, and a growing sense that I was finally fighting back instead of just taking punches. So what's the plan? Ray asked. I looked at the evidence of my former life, then at the surveillance photos of Bryce's current one. We're going to give him exactly what he gave me, which is a front row seat to watching his life fall apart. The thing about revenge is that it requires patience, and patience had never been my strong suit. But sitting in Ray's car outside the Cambridge Hotel, where Bryce met his married girlfriend twice a week, I was learning the fine art of waiting for the perfect moment. There, Ray said, pointing to the hotel's side entrance. Right on schedule. Bryce emerged from the building looking like a man who'd just gotten away with something. His hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and he wore the satisfied smirk of someone who thought he was cleverer than everyone else. Behind him, Angela Torres checked her reflection in the glass door before heading to her car. I raised the camera with the telephoto lens and started shooting. Digital photography was a beautiful thing. No film to develop, no evidence trail, just high-resolution proof of adultery that could be shared instantly with anyone who might be interested. You getting this? Ray asked. Every sordid detail. I captured Angela, kissing Bryce goodbye, their hands lingering on each other like teenagers at prom. Her husband's going to love these. You sure you want to drag innocent people into this? She's not innocent, and her husband deserves to know what his wife does on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Ray didn't argue, but I could feel his disapproval like heat from a radiator. 25 years as a cop had given him strong opinions about collateral damage and unintended consequences. But 25 years as a cop had also taught him that sometimes the only justice you get is the kind you make yourself. We followed Bryce back to his expensive studio apartment in Back Bay. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place that charged extra for the privilege of living in a shoebox with a view. I wondered how long he could afford it on a real estate agent's declining commissions and his ex-wife's alimony demands. Phase 2? Ray asked. Phase 2. We waited until Bryce's BMW was parked and he disappeared into the building. Then I walked over to his car with a small bag of supplies I'd purchased at various hardware stores around the city. Nothing illegal, nothing that would cause permanent damage, just some creative applications of everyday materials. The valve stems on his tires accepted the small pebbles I inserted with the enthusiasm of a slot machine taking quarters. Not enough to cause a blowout, just a slow leak that would leave him stranded at the most inconvenient possible moment. The glitter I poured into his air conditioning vents was a nice touch. It would take weeks to get it all out, and every time he turned on the AC, he'd be reminded that someone was watching. You're enjoying this too much, Ray observed when I returned to the car. I'm enjoying this exactly the right amount. My phone buzzed with a text message. Liam, Mom wants to talk to you, says it's about Maddie. I stared at the message for a long moment. I'd been so focused on making Bryce's life miserable that I'd almost forgotten about the real casualties in this war. My kids, who were caught between their parents' mutual destruction. Rain check on Phase 3, I told Ray. I need to go see my wife. Ex-wife. Not yet. The coffee shop where Elise had asked to meet was neutral territory. A Starbucks in Harvard Square where we'd taken the kids for hot chocolate when they were younger. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a latte like it was a life preserver. She looked tired. The stress of the last month had carved new lines around her eyes, and her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a ponytail that suggested she'd stopped caring about appearances. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. You look terrible, she said when I sat down across from her. Thanks. You look great too. Don't be sarcastic, Nick. We need to talk about Maddie. What about her? She's been asking questions. About why we're not living at home. About why you were in the hospital. About why her friend's parents look at me funny when I pick her up from school. I leaned back in my chair and studied my wife's face. What kind of questions? She wants to know if we're getting divorced. She wants to know if it's her fault. She wants to know why her father won't come see her. That last one hit me like a punch to the gut. I've been calling, you don't answer. Bryce thinks it's better if we keep some distance while things settle down. Bryce thinks. I repeated the words like they tasted bad. Since when does Bryce make decisions about my relationship with my daughter? Since he's the one helping me get back on my feet? By moving you into his studio apartment and isolating you from your family? Elise's face flushed red. He's been nothing but supportive. I'm sure he has. Very supportive. Especially on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at the Cambridge Marriott. The color drained from her face like someone had opened a valve. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos I'd taken earlier. Angela Torres kissing Bryce goodbye, their hands all over each other. The satisfied look of two people who thought they were getting away with something. Taken this afternoon, I said, sliding the phone across the table. Your supportive boyfriend has been very busy supporting other people's wives too. Elise stared at the photos like they were written in a foreign language. Her hands shook as she scrolled through them, and I watched 17 years of marriage and a month of new relationship crumble in real time. This can't be right, she whispered. Tuesday and Thursday every week for the last month. Her name's Angela Torres. Her husband's a firefighter named Miguel. Nice guy, from what I hear. Probably doesn't deserve this any more than I did. Elise pushed the phone back across the table like it was radioactive. Why are you showing me this? Because you said we needed to talk about Maddie. And Maddie deserves better than being raised by a woman who's too stupid to see she's being played by the same man who played her marriage. You bastard. Yeah, probably. But I'm a bastard who's never cheated on you, never lied to you, and never put another woman ahead of our children. She was crying now, silent tears that dripped onto the table between us. For a moment, I almost reached across to comfort her. Old habits die hard. What do you want, Nick? I want my daughter back. I want you to stop letting Bryce make decisions about our family, and I want you to start thinking about what's best for Maddie instead of what's best for your ego. And if I don't? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. Then Miguel Torres gets copies of these photos, along with documentation of every hotel visit, every restaurant meal, and every lie his wife has told him about working late. After that, I start making some calls to your former coworkers, your neighbors, and anyone else who might be interested in knowing what kind of woman abandons her family for a serial cheater. Elise's face went white. You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other across the table, like duelists at high noon. 17 years of marriage had taught us both how to wound each other where it hurt most, but this was different. This was war. I need time to think, she said finally. You have until Sunday. After that, Miguel Torres gets an anonymous email and your private life becomes very public. I stood up to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Elise, I'm sorry it came to this. But you chose Bryce over our family, and now you get to live with the consequences. What about you, Nick? What are the consequences for you? I looked down at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, sitting alone at a coffee shop table with tears on her cheeks and betrayal in her eyes. I get my kids back, I said, and Bryce gets exactly what he deserves. Sunday came with the kind of thunderstorm that makes you believe in divine intervention. Lightning split the sky over Boston like God was taking photographs, and the rain hit the windows of Liam's apartment with the intensity of machine tool fire. They're coming, Liam said from his position by the window. He'd been watching the street for the last hour, ever since Elise had called to say she was bringing Maddie back home and that Bryce was coming with her to discuss the situation like adults. I'd spent the morning preparing for their visit with the kind of attention to detail that had made me a successful contractor. Every tool had its place, every contingency had been considered, and every possible outcome had been planned for, except the one where everyone walked away happy. You sure about this, Dad? Liam asked. Because once this starts, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment Bryce put his hands on your mother at our barbecue, I replied, checking the battery on my phone for the third time. Everything since then has just been choosing how the story ends. My phone buzzed with a text from Ray. In position. You've got backup if you need it. Ray was stationed in the parking lot with two of his former cop buddies who'd agreed to help out for old time's sake. They couldn't officially intervene, but they could make sure things didn't get completely out of hand. Car pulling up, Liam announced. Through the rain-streaked window, I could see Elise's Honda Accord parking next to the dumpster. 3 figures got out. Elise, Maddie, and Bryce. My daughter looked small and confused, caught between her parents' war, like a civilian in a combat zone. The knock on the door came exactly 3 minutes later. I opened it to find my family standing in the hallway like strangers asking for directions. Hello, Nick, Elise said. Her voice was carefully neutral, but I could see the strain around her eyes. The photos I'd shown her had done their work. Daddy! Maddie launched herself into my arms with the enthusiasm of a 13-year-old who'd been told too many lies by too many adults. She smelled like her mother's perfume and her own special mixture of shampoo and innocence. Hey, Princess, I said, holding her tight enough to convince myself she was real. I missed you. I missed you too. Mom said you were sick. I'm feeling much better now. Bryce cleared his throat like a man who was used to being the center of attention and didn't like being ignored. Nick, we need to talk. Do we? Because last time we talked, I ended up in the hospital. That was a misunderstanding. Was it? Because my ribs seemed to remember it differently. Elise stepped between us like a referee at a boxing match. Can we please do this inside? Maddie doesn't need to hear this. I stepped back and let them into the apartment. Liam nodded at his sister, but kept his distance from his mother and Bryce. The apartment suddenly felt very small, with 5 people and 17 years of accumulated resentment crowded into it. Nice place, Bryce said, looking around with the practiced eye of a real estate agent. Cozy. It's temporary, I replied, unlike some living situations. Elise shot me a warning look. Nick, please. We're here to talk about what's best for the children. Are we? Because what's best for the children is not having their mother shacked up with a serial cheater who beats up their father. That's enough, Bryce snapped. You started this whole thing with your little stunt at my house. Your ex-house. Janelle got it in the divorce, remember? The color rose in Bryce's face like mercury in a thermometer. You destroyed my marriage. No. I just made sure Janelle knew what kind of man she was married to. There's a difference. Daddy, what's going on? Maddie's voice cut through the adult posturing like a knife. She was looking back and forth between us with the kind of confusion that comes from realizing the grown-ups don't have everything figured out after all. Your father's being difficult, Elise said. Your mother is learning some hard truths about her boyfriend, I countered. Bryce stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. You want to finish what we started in that alley? Actually, yes, I do. What happened next occurred with the kind of slow-motion clarity that comes right before a car accident. Bryce swung at me with the telegraphed haymaker of a man who'd been getting by on intimidation for too long. I ducked under it and came up with a right cross that connected with his jaw like a hammer hitting a nail. He staggered backward, crashed into Liam's coffee table, and went down in a tangle of limbs and overpriced furniture. For a moment, the only sound was the rain against the windows and Maddie's sharp intake of breath. Jesus, Nick! Elise screamed. Bryce rolled over and tried to get up, red trickling from his split lip. You son of a... Stay down, I advised. You're embarrassing yourself. But Bryce had never been good at taking advice. He lunged at me from the floor, trying to tackle me around the waist. I sidestepped and helped him along with a knee to his ribs that sent him crashing into the kitchenette. Stop it! Maddie was crying now. Both of you, just stop. I looked at my daughter's tear-streaked face and felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't how I'd wanted her to see me, as just another man solving his problems with his fists. You're right, Princess, I said, stepping away from Bryce. This isn't the way. Bryce used the counter to pull himself upright, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. This isn't over. Yes, it is. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. Because if you ever come near me or my family again, Miguel Torres gets a very interesting email about what his wife does on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. You're bluffing. I held up the phone so he could see the photos of him and Angela Torres. Am I? The fight went out of him like air from a punctured tire. He looked from the phone to Elise, to the door like a trapped animal calculating escape routes. You want to know what's really funny? I continued. While you were threatening me and stealing my wife, I was doing some research. Turns out you're 3 months behind on your rent, 2 months behind on your car payments, and about 6 months away from bankruptcy. Angela Torres isn't the only married woman you've been seeing. She's just the one whose husband I can reach. Nick. Elise's voice was barely a whisper. Oh, this gets better. Remember when you told me I was finished? Remember when you had your friend here beat the heck out of me in that alley? I gestured toward Bryce, who was leaning against the counter like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Well, while you were celebrating your victory, I was making some new friends. Friends who work at the bank that holds your car loan. Friends who know your landlord. Friends who think irresponsible tenants and cheating boyfriends are bad for the neighborhood. What are you saying? I'm saying I bought your debt, Bryce. All of it. Your car, your apartment, your credit cards. I own you now. The silence that followed was broken only by the thunder outside and the sound of Bryce's world collapsing around him. That's impossible, he said. Is it? Ask your landlord. Ask your bank. Ask anyone who will still take your calls. I smiled with genuine pleasure for the first time in weeks. You're evicted, Bryce. From your apartment, from your car, from my life, and from my family. Security will be by tomorrow morning to collect the keys. Elise was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. How could you afford to... Turns out Janelle was very interested in helping finance your boyfriend's downfall. Apparently she had some money left over after the divorce settlement, and she wanted to make sure Bryce learned some valuable lessons about consequences. Bryce slumped against the counter like a deflated balloon. You can't do this. I already did it. The paperwork was finalized this morning. I looked at my wife, my daughter, and the man who'd tried to destroy my family. So here's how this is going to work. Elise, you and Maddie are moving back into the apartment. Bryce, you're moving out of the city. Tonight, if I see you anywhere near my family again, Miguel Torres gets those photos, your other girlfriend's husbands get some very interesting phone calls, and I start exploring legal options for attack and battery. Daddy? Maddie's voice was small and uncertain. Yeah, Princess? Are you and Mom getting divorced? I looked at Elise, who was crying again. Not the angry tears from before, but the exhausted tears of someone who'd finally run out of fight. I don't know, baby, I said honestly. But whatever happens, you and Liam are going to be okay. That's a promise. Bryce pushed himself away from the counter and headed for the door without looking at anyone. This isn't over, he muttered. Yeah, it is, I replied. You just haven't figured it out yet. He left without another word, and I could hear his footsteps echoing down the stairs like the sound of a man walking toward his own execution. Elise stood in the middle of the apartment, looking lost and broken and older than her 38 years. What happens now? Now you take Maddie home, and we figure out how to be parents instead of enemies. What about us? I looked at my wife, the woman I'd loved for 17 years, the mother of my children, the person who'd chosen another man over our marriage and tried to find something left to save. I don't know, I said, but for the first time in months, I think we might have a chance to find out. Outside, the storm was beginning to pass, and through the clearing clouds, I could see the first stars appearing over Boston. Somewhere in the city, Bryce Landon was packing his belongings and learning that actions have consequences. Somewhere else, Miguel Torres was about to get an anonymous email that would change his life forever. But here in this small apartment above a Chinese restaurant, my family was together again, broken and uncertain, but together. And for now, that was enough.